Recently, I've been watching Gosei Sentai Dairanger, the 17th iteration of Toei's Super Sentai series. The show sort of had a Power Rangers adaptation in the form of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2, but that still largely drew from Ranger. At this point, having seen 18 out of 50 episodes, along with the so called movie, it's really just a regular length filler episode, I'm roughly a third of the way through the season. I'm going to give my thoughts on the show so far. Before I really get going, I want to mention that these are my thoughts and impressions as they were when I finished initially scripting this review, and may not fully reflect my views at the time of the video's release, since I am likely to watch more of the show once my script is done. Also, since this video is rather long, I likely will need to split it into multiple individual videos due to the 15-minute maximum restriction that YouTube seems to have on my videos at this point. I really liked Dairanger so far. From the opening theme into the ending theme, both by New Jack Takaro, to the various insert themes, all the music is fantastic. The poses, the roll calls, and the action are amazing. To get a good idea of what it's like picture a mishmash of Power Rangers, obviously, Dragon Ball, and Star Wars, and then probably amp it up to be somewhere from 12% to 83% better than what you had in mind. This season's villains are known as the Gorma. My understanding is that they're basically just humans who've accumulated high levels of something called Yo power, which gives them superpowers in their human forms and generally allows them to transform into rubber suit monster forms, in which they're even more powerful. The Gorma's foot soldiers are the Kajpatros, whose transformed states resemble waiters from a fancy restaurant. For the most part, they feel like fairly standard Sentai foot soldiers to me, although their costumes do not feel as cheap as many of the others. Unlike the Dorodoros from the following season or the Putties from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers seasons 1 and 2, the Codpetros seem to be competent enough that they're never defeated by some non-superpowered randos off the street. The Gorma in Japan seem to be led by a group called the Gorma Triumvirate. There seems to be some kind of other higher authorities among the Gorma, but at this point and in this series, it's very unclear. The Gorma Triumvirate consists of Lieutenant Colonel Shaddam, Lieutenant Colonel Ligara, and Major Zydos, clad in outfits that one might mistake for ridiculous parodies of BDSM gimp suits. The three of them are overwhelmingly powerful. In early episodes, they are shown easily tossing the Rangers around, while the monsters of the week fairly consistently seem to have their hands full fighting a Ranger or two at a time. Besides one earlier fight between Gara and uh, Kujaku, I'll get into her later. It's not until episode 14 that the three of them show any signs of being challenged in a fight. Even then, it takes the Rangers' strongest team attack, and the Gorma Triumvirate members seem to easily push it back once they transform into their stronger forms. Speaking of their transformations, rather than the rubber suit monsters typical of the Gorma minions, these three Gorma turn into what I think should be called mannequin freaks. It feels a little out of place, and it would reek of lack of creativity if it were done a little differently, but I feel that these mannequin-like monster forms have just the effect that they need. It sets them apart as special, as something far beyond the typical Gorma. There's something about it, maybe an uncanny valley aspect, that freaks me out in a way that I think is appropriate for the powered up forms of these elite villains. The monsters of the week so far have been pretty good, although a couple have felt a little bit forgettable. So far, we've had a yo yo kid who turns into a tentacle monster, a tall basketball guy who somehow is a purse monster. I don't really see the connection. I normally think of him as just the basketball guy, although I guess he did also have a Grim Reaper type form. And we've had the key jester, a creepy guy who uses his keys to extract children's souls and uses them to bring evil dolls to life. A lipstick monster who abducts girls to turn them into her backup singers. A Darth Vader guy who absolutely stomps against the Rangers until he turns against his Palpatine. A mirror monster who traps women and who are caught up admiring their own beauty. Sort of forgettable cherry blossom monster who's just suddenly there. A magnet priest guy who is really entertaining to watch if you don't have to be there with him. A Charlie Chaplin guy with the power of drunken tofu. A body hopping kabuki performer. A group of three stooges, as the translators call them. A clay doll that turns children to stone unless they have Gorma ancestry. A group of three sisters, and in the so-called movie, the Duke of Trump. With regard to the monsters of the week, I have only three main complaints. First off, the basketball dude, who's apparently named Purse Priest, feels rather forgettable. I think this is because his appearance in episode 2 ended up being effectively a reduced length filler episode shoved in to pad out the runtime after the fight with Baron String in the premiere ran over into the second episode, leaving Purse Priest without enough time to shine. Similarly, Sakura Viscount, the cherry blossom monster from episode 10, feels rather like a tacked on extra bit in part 2 of the Kujaku two-parter, whereas Mirror Makeup Artist, the monster of the week for part 1, was pretty central to the plot of the two-parter. Finally, while I generally like the splash of extra lighthearted humor that the three Gorma Stooges bring, while still not feeling like they bring a pinch of genuine threat, I couldn't notice that Boss Kamikaze, in addition to his Imperial Japanese flag designs that he's adorned with, it displays is what seems to be a Nazi swastika on his motorcycle. I find it objectionable and highly distasteful for the symbol to be displayed on any character besides a villain who's either an actual Nazi or is not a Nazi but is depicted as absolute, utter trash. I do not find it appropriate for this to be displayed by a comic relief villain who has no affiliation with the Nazis, and I am not sure that I would be fully comfortable about it being displayed by a comic relief villain who did have Nazi affiliations either. Besides the Gorma, most of the focus obviously is on the Dairangers and on their mentor, Master Kaku. At this point, we have been shown very little about Master Kaku. He sometimes gives advice and sometimes fights, but it seems like he mostly just sits around in his basement. Other people seem to perceive him as more useless than I do, although this may be due to things that I have not yet seen. I find it odd that no one in the show seems to make a big deal about how this man who looks like he's somewhere from 35 to 63 years old was alive 6,000 years ago. The Dairangers are martial artists who wield chi power to fight the Gorma. Their chi power gives them access to various abilities that they can wield, both transformed and untransformed, chiefly individual abilities that each ranger has associated with their elemental powers. With their wrist worn aura changers, and in the case of the Kiba Ranger, the Kiba Changer, they transform into mighty spandex clad warriors. In red, we have the Rio Ranger, Rio of the Heavenly Fire Star. Rio works as a chef, but we don't really see much of that. We view the events of the first episode from his perspective, where he initially has even less idea of what is going on than we do. Of the six Rangers, he is the only one to be a direct child of the previous generation of Dairangers who fought the Gorma 6,000 years earlier. His father betrayed the old team and joined the Gorma as Ironface Chorio, but fell in love with a vaguely ordinary human woman in the 20th century. He left her and rejoined the ranks of the Gorma when Rio and his sister Yoko were young, but when the modern Die Rangers finally faced him, Rio was able to turn him back. In green is the Shishi Ranger, Dago of the Heavenly Phantom Star, wielding the power of illusion. Dago works at a pet shop. His focus episodes so far tend to revolve around Kujaku, an ancient warrior who's referred to as being an incarnation of the Peacock Buddha. 6,000 years ago, when else, of course. An act of mercy on Kujaku's part toward Lieutenant Colonel Gara was met with betrayal, leaving Kujaku trapped within the monster known as Mirror Makeup Artist for millennia. When Daigo finally was able to free her, Kujaku was twisted by her long imprisonment, focusing upon revenge on Gara above all else. Once Kujaku was freed, Daigo's tendency in his focus episodes is to lament her change and beg for her return to her old merciful self. At the end of the last Daigo Kujaku episode I saw, it seemed like maybe Daigo's message was just starting to get through to Kujaku, but she also seems to have picked up some strange affliction whose nature is unclear at this point in the show. I mostly like the Daigo Kujaku storyline, but some parts, like Kujaku seemingly saying that since the people afflicted with the effects of Sakura Viscount's blossoms were not in control of their actions, they should not be shown any mercy, seemed rather illogical, maybe kind of stupid, and certain parts of it were starting to feel repetitive in the third episode of the storyline. In blue is the Tenma Ranger, Shoji of the Heavenly Gravity Star. Unlike the other core rangers, Shoji seems to be a slacker who doesn't go to school and doesn't have a job. At this point in this season, Shoji has not had much individual focus on him. His one focus episode so far involved him saving and attempting to impress a girl that he had a crush on. In the end, he inspired her, giving her the courage to ask out some other guy. In yellow is the Kirin Ranger, Kazu of the Heavenly Time Star. Kazu works as a hairstylist and tends to dress in much more formal attire than the other Dai Rangers. Like Shoji, he has not had much individual focus yet at this point in the season. His sole focus episode at this point matched him up against the alcohol-obsessed Tofu Hermit based on Kazu's drunken boxing style. In pink, we have the Ho-Oh Ranger, Rin, or alternatively Lin, of the Heavenly Wind Star. Rin is this team's sole female member. whereas Ryu's father was a surviving member of the old Dairanger team from 6,000 years earlier, and the other three guys seem to simply have been selected by Master Haku as being good enough for the team despite having fairly ordinary lineages. Rin is a descendant, seemingly through the more typical numerous generations that 6,000 years would entail, of some members of the Dai tribe that opposed the Gorma all those millennia ago. While the male rangers hail from Japan, Rin comes from China. The youngest of the core team, she attends school off screen. Back in China, she was raised by her great uncle Guhan, who she normally refers to as her grandfather. Guhan is the weapons craftsman who developed the Die Ranger's aura changers, the Kiba changer, and various other pieces of equipment that they use. He appears to be something of a mentor to Kaku, although I'm not certain if this guy was also around 6,000 years earlier during the initial conflict. He certainly looks older than any of the characters who I know have survived since then. Based on the amount of detail that I give each ranger when describing them, you may think that Shoji and Kazu are less important than the rest of the Dai Rangers. I don't think you would be the only one who thinks that about them. The opening theme's writer, Saburo Yatsude, he seems to think so too, since the opening theme's lyrics say, Ryu Ranger, Shishi Ranger, Tenmaki Rin, Ho-Oh Ranger. Finally, in white, we have the Kiba Ranger, Ko of the Howling New Star. Ko is a 9-year-old apparent orphan, although my wiki spoilers tell me that his true parentage is of great importance. When Ko transforms into the Kiba Ranger, he grows up to adult size, similar to what Justin later did in Power Rangers Turbo. To hide Ko's true identity and keep him on the right track, Ko's sword, Byakko Shinken, often speaks for him and gives him directions. While the core Rangers were not really adapted into Power Rangers, excluding the quote unquote new powers in Super Mega Farce, Ko was adapted as the Mighty Morphin White Ranger, Tommy Oliver, and Byakko Shinken as Saba. Interestingly, Ko's actor Hisashi Sakai, he also played Burai, obviously just young Burai in flashbacks and stuff like that. Tommy's counterpart in Jew Ranger. Ko had been living with some brochures in the area, but after becoming a Die Ranger, he moved in uninvited with Rin. At this point in the season, Ko has just finished his introductory two-parter, so I have not gotten much of an impression of him yet. I have some worry that Ko may shift the focus towards younger children, like Justin did in Turbo, and like what I believe happens just as how things are for the season in Jew Ranger, a shift that fans such as myself seem to generally be dissatisfied with. However, my predictions in this regard may yet prove to be wrong. I have really been enjoying this season. I like these extra flashy suits. I was really surprised to see the Yo-Yo Kid transform into Baron String the first time I saw episode 1. And then it surprised me again the second time I saw episode 1. It made me smile when the Die Rangers were supposed to be tracking down Kabuki Novice, but then they saw a violent bank robber who had an actual gun and was shooting at them, and they went, "Oh, let's go chase that guy now." I was really shocked when Rin's grandfather came and pushed the robber off a building, and quite glad when it turned out that somehow that was fine. fine and he wasn't actually killing somebody. I found Key Jester's evil dolls to be pretty funny to watch. I liked the show's take on their version of Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine. I think the slow build up to Diurno finally being formed was fairly well executed. It was fun watching Father Magnet wander her around, fooling around, especially before he started putting people's lives in jeopardy. I he thought it was a a good, a, uh, rare twist when basketball dude or purse priest was about to grow giant with his growth bomb, and the Rangers went nope and threw their staffs at him, pinning him so he couldn't do it. However, Gosei Sentai Dairanger is by no means perfect. I have mentioned how I feel that some of the Daigo Kujaku plot gets a little bit too repetitive. I have alluded a little bit to how the fantastic comic relief villains that the three Gorma Stooges otherwise would be, complete with association football being played in the quarry with real explosions, while the Three Stooges call the game soccer, and the background music has voices in English saying, "What's the name of the game? Football," is ruined by the swastika on Boss Kamikaze's motorcycle. And yes, unlike the the old Whitebeard symbol from One Piece, this really is a swastika, not a manji. It has prongs pointing clockwise, while the prongs on a manji point counterclockwise. However, these are small scale issues. The main issue that the season has lies more with its failure to explain what the heck is going on and why. In the first episode, it's a good thing for us to be a little confused along with Rio during the first half. However, once we are shown him getting some answers, the explanation evidently continues far past what we are shown. When the five Die Rangers are being attacked by String, and suddenly they all reveal their aura changes and transform, it comes too out of the blue. After that, for more than a fifth of the full season, the best explanation I he had was that the Die Rangers basically just pulled the aura changes out of their butts with the power of chi or something like that, which Rio would have had to learn off screen in a very short time without the audience getting any reference to him learning this. It was not until episode 13 when Master Kaku mentioned Master Guhan having invented them that I finally had any idea that these were produced by someone else prior to the Die Rangers fighting Bear and String. Even now, I don't really know why these people are fighting each other. I know the Gorma are threatening humanity and the Die Rangers need to stop them, but I feel like someone forgot to tell me why the Gorma are doing this. The closest thing to an explanation I've gotten from the show is Shaddam saying something in episode 12 about how since alcohol messes with humans' brains, we're not even worth keeping around as puppets. There was something on the wiki about Yo Power making them insane, but while some of the Gormer do seem to be a little nutty, I really don't think I'm seeing enough evidence in this show so far to convince me both that Yo Power is messing with their minds and that, and that is the primary reason for their actions. The season is more than a third of the way over for me now, and I really should either have somewhat clear motivations for most of the Gorma, or have some statement of the Gorma wanting to acquire some item or talisman, of them having a properly articulated desire to out humanity or take over the world, etc. And yet the show has told me none of these things. Similarly, when Master Kaku spoke with Iron-Faced Shoryo before they fought, there was talk of Yo Power being the dark to Chi Power's light, and Master Kaku spoke of Yo power as if it was evil in and of itself. However, the show, at least up to this point, refuses to elaborate. Besides these rather vague statements by Master Kaku, unless I'm really missing something that should be really obvious based on what Yo power means, which I have really tried and failed to find. The only things we're really given pointing to Yo power being inherently evil is the fact that its users, the Gorma, tend to be bad people who use it for bad stuff. As I said before, I really like this season so far. It has so much awesomeness. I just wish that they would do a better job of explaining it, whether through info dumps or demonstrations. Show, don't tell, or tell, don't show. Just make sure you do one of those. I am not confident in my scales yet, but so far I give this season an 4.75 heavenly stars out of 5. Okay, now this is me after I've finished recording the initial script. I actually finished watching Dairanger more than a month ago, and I might eventually put out a shorter video where in much less detail I review the remainder of the season. It's definitely not a guarantee, but I might also do reviews like this on the first thirds of Time Ranger and Abba Ranger. I also caught up to the One Piece manga this week, and I'm thinking maybe I could eventually do a video where I try to figure out what the most fitting devil fruits would be for the characters in the middle. An American sitcom from the early 2000s that I used to watch until it ended. I've been working on this video since early May, and I'm glad to finally be finishing it. I hope that you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, then please like and subscribe.